as we start the meeting here in just a second. So give me a minute to set that up. And Kathy, if you want to get your presentation up and going. All right, that's good. Okay, so again, welcome to Desert Flying Club Safety Seminar for April 2019. I do have everybody muted at the moment. There'll be some time for Q&A a little bit later on the meeting, but just for because we have about 30 people in here, if we let everybody be unmuted, it does take up a little bit of time, so or can be a lot of noise. So just some club announcements wanted to make before we start the meeting. Very excited about the growth of the club, kind of good flying season, hopefully when the winds calm down, but you know, a lot of things going on in the club right now. We are working on adding additional aircraft into the club too. So we are working on adding a cross-country plane, a couple of trainers, and potentially a high performance singles. So we're excited about some of the growth. So be watching out for the announcements about these additional aircraft coming on. Let me start this sharing on Facebook here. There's always something to do here. So again, excited about it. About the club and the growth there. After the meeting, we'll spend some time on answering any questions that we have. So without further delay, I'd like to turn the time over to Kathy Stockdale to have our presentation tonight. So Kathy, take it away.
All right, so it looks like I can unmute myself. So hi, good evening. Thank you for having me, Nathan. And Desert Flying Club. So my name is Kathy Stockdale, and just a little bit of background on me. I'm a Citation 10 pilot with a small charter operation out of California. I live in Las Vegas though. The lead representative at Henderson on the FAA safety team. I've been doing that for a few years. I'm also CFII, and this is an old presentation, so that should say MEI as well underneath there. But so that's my background. I've had this personal minimums talk for a little bit. And I gotta say, when I first started out, I got this topic because nobody else wanted to do personal minimums. We couldn't find anybody. And kind of coming into it, personal minimums seemed like kind of the Boy Scout type Scouts honor. Oh, I will not fly in under 5 miles visibility, Scouts honor type of a thing. So not really understanding how these things work and why we need to be setting explicit, specific limitations on ourselves when we have other methods of creating good decisions for ourselves. I set out to go figure this out. And a lot of the stuff that you will see out there that's published by the FAA, by AOPA, things like that are very basic personal minimums. It's almost like a launching point. I won't fly in more than 15 knots of crosswind, that kind of thing, are very specific. But personal minimums are actually something that we've been doing for a long time. We have not made them explicit. It's just something that we've been innately doing. We've been calling it common sense this whole time. Well, common sense says that I'm a student pilot, so I'm not going to fly an airplane in over 10 knots of crosswind. Or they've been left up to your instructor, or they've been left up to whether you feel like your shoulders are kind of raising up to your ears when you work into a situation where the clouds are lowering around you. And not only that, but we've got other considerations besides weather, like how sick are we willing to be before we're allowed to fly? And is that even something that we can quantify? So all of these things are things that we have been working on for the longest time. And we're going to talk about why personal minimums are something that you actually should be doing. And this is something that was a journey of discovery for me too. As I created this talk. And then we're going to talk about how you can create them using the basic tools that have been given to you on various websites. I will link to one of those and we'll go through it a little bit. After that, we're going to get into the more nebulous gray area personal minimums that don't have concrete answers, things like external pressure and what you can do to what kind of minimums you can set for yourself, what kind of limitations you can set for yourself for facing a flight that has a lot of pressure behind it, people who are waiting on you, passengers who need to get to their destination at a certain time. But we're going to start with the definition of a personal minimum and what they are. If I can figure out how to advance my slides. So, and here's a couple of examples of these things. So here's a great example. So specifics, we're gonna fly in ceilings that are basic VFR over 3,000 feet AGL. I can't see my own screen here, excuse me. While I click around here, technical difficulties. A personal minimum could be something like, I haven't flown this airplane in a year and a half, and I'd like to take a safety pilot with me the next time I go. This is something that I personally have since I've been flying a jet for about a year now, and I haven't touched a piston engine about a year and a half. So far be it for me to just go jumping back in that thing, do a night flight in the mountains and forget how all the avionics work. It's just not really going to work. So right now, my personal minimum is the next time I jump into a single engine piston, I'm grabbing a safety pilot at a minimum, if not a CFI. Another one might be I must file IFR if the visibility is below X, if the weather is forecast below Y. And that doesn't have to be, if the field is IFR, you can file IFR if it's forecast to be marginal VFR, or if it's forecast to stay VFR for the next 2 hours and then become IFR. So we'll go through a real good scenario for that. And, just a number of other specific personal minimums. These are all the ones that are listed on the basic things. Probably some of you have heard of these. So, but, the set of procedures, like it says here, the rules, criteria, guidelines under whether you're going to operate are a personal decision. It's always been a personal decision. There are things that a 20,000-hour pilot would do and feel comfortable with that a 15-hour pilot is not going to feel comfortable with going solo into. So, all right. This is one of my favorite phrases, and you'll see this one kind of repeated throughout the talk. A superior pilot uses his superior judgment to avoid situations which require the use of his superior skill. So I see a couple people smiling. Have you guys seen this one before? And if you would, do me a favor and respond to me in the chat. I'm kind of curious to see how many people have seen this. Seen it? Gleim taught it. That's a good one. Fantastic. Anybody who hasn't seen it? So it's pretty common knowledge. All right, so we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of re-emphasizing that. But we're going to start with my absolute favorite scenario here in a little bit. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about why personal minimums. And I kind of made this the crux of the talk because a lot of people out there either pay lip service to personal minimums or flat out don't believe in personal minimums. And I was frankly one of them. So we'll kind of start from there. The first thing we're going to do is a Goofus and Gallon scenario. I hope somebody out there remembers who Goofus and Gallon is. We'll talk about it in a second. And then we're going to talk about what it means to front load your decisions and push all your decisions to the earliest point possible, and how personal minimums will cause you to front load your decisions and keep your flight from decision fatigue, which will be the next topic we talk after that. So really what these things are designed to do, really what personal minimums are doing is preventing this decision fatigue and front loading all these decisions. So after that, we're going to develop personal minimums here. We're going to go through the basics of developing personal minimums. I've got a link for you guys. I didn't want to attach a PDF. And then we're going to go through PAVE, if you remember that one, pilot, aircraft, environment, and external pressures. And we're going to be looking at other personal minimums that may or may not apply to you in your specific type of flying. We'll do one more scenario about Joe and his personal minimums. You guys will actually go set those. And I'm kind of curious to see what you guys come up with on this one, because you're always going to come up with something that I don't. And then last but not least, we're just going to talk about when all else fails, how to have good aeronautical decision-making when in doubt, without personal minimums, because you can't set them for everything that you're going to come across. All right, here we go. So I've got a Goofus and Gallon scenario, and I thought that everybody and their dog had heard of Goofus and Gallon, but clearly I was wrong the last time I ran through some of these. So if you don't know who Goofus and Gallon are, these were always in the highlights magazines and the older magazines, things like that. Somebody's typing about that. Anyway. So Goofus and Gallant. Goofus was the kid who is always doing horrible things like yelling at his mother and not cleaning up after his lunch and wiping his crumbs all over his sleeves. And Gallant is the goody two-shoes kid who always does what's right. Here he is walking with the scissors pointing down. I hope you can read that. You know, he's always asking his mother politely and saying please and thank you. So, but they make a really great pilot scenario. So I turned them into pilots for this example, and we're gonna go through a flight with them. So I don't have a whole lot put up on these slides here, so you're just gonna have to listen to me on this one. But we are going to make a flight from Henderson to Van Nuys Airport. So here's the scenario. And this is about lowering ceilings. We've got both Goofus and Gallant, and they are private pilots in Las Vegas. They both became pilots so that they could travel to SoCal for work. Neither one of them are IFR rated. So whenever it becomes cloudy, they just drive. And on a clear sunny day, they launch for Van Nuys going to work. So the TAF had called for VFR for the next 2 hours. And then it called for a layer to come in with the weather deteriorating into marginal VFR and later IFR. But the way everything looked, they had 2 hours of sunny flying at their destination by the time they arrived. And so neither of them filed an IFR flight plan. Obviously they can't, they're not rated for it. And they left with what they thought was plenty of time. And of course, as scenarios are wont to do, this one turns bad. So the weather rolls in about 2 hours earlier than its forecast. And we're dealing with cloud layers now. And their ceilings are gonna get lower as they keep on moving through their flight. Gallant, that's the good one for those of you who don't remember Goofus and Gallant. Gallant's flight is going to take a different turn than Goofus's flight. Gallant has developed his personal minimums, and he's got a personal minimum of 3,000 feet AGL. So he wants basic VFR. If he gets into marginal VFR, he feels uncomfortable. He also knows that he's in mountainous terrain, so he wants 10 miles of visibility. And to some people, 10 miles of visibility means when you go outside and you can see the mountains on the other side of Las Vegas, but that's not what 10 miles of visibility actually is. 10 miles of visibility is actually when you can only see 10 miles in front of you. So with the air mets for mountain obscuration that are going to be popping up here in a little bit, 10 miles sounds like a healthy personal minimum. Anytime it dips to 9, 8, 7, you could potentially be getting a lot closer to a mountain than you intend on, especially if you're flying VFR. So 10 miles is pretty good there. Gallant always plans an alternate. He plans an alternate no matter what. He's planning for things like the runway at Van Nuys shutting down. An aircraft runs off the runway and is crashed between two runways, and both runways are shut down, and now he's got to divert to another field. This is work he's talking about, so he's got a place that's got either a rental car or somewhere he can get an Uber to work and make everything work. So whenever his plans go south, whenever something doesn't work right, he's got the ability to back out and go somewhere else without thinking too hard about it. So, and some people would say that that's just good planning, and some people would say that that's his personal minimum. He doesn't launch until he's got an alternate in his brain. So he also mitigates external pressure whenever possible. So he's already called his boss and told him that he's flying in and that he should be on time, but just in case, be ready to postpone the meeting an hour later. All right, Goofus is actually a pretty smart pilot. He's just as knowledgeable as Gallant is, but he doesn't have any personal minimums. He's never developed them. So we'll see what happens to both of them. So first things first, we're gonna do Gallant in green and Goofus in red. You can see that at the bottom. So, and I'm not gonna show you guys the unforecast layer here because then you won't be able to see the map. So here he goes. He's coming in from Hector VOR. He's gone south of all the restricted airspaces that you guys see in and around here. I hope you guys can see my mouse. And he reaches Victorville and starts avoiding the terrain by going due west. And he's going to have to turn before he gets to the Palmdale airspace. But right here is when he's developing, or when he's seeing all those clouds develop that we saw on this previous slide. You can see those right here around Victorville. So he's flying at an altitude of 10,500 and he's got to drop down to 8,500. The clouds are even lower ahead. So now he's got to drop down to 6,500 by the time he gets past Victorville. So what is he thinking as he's seeing these clouds lower? Because he's got these personal minimums. You don't have to answer that one, but you can if you want. So he's thinking about this personal minimum that he's already got at 3,000 feet in 10 miles. That's what he's thinking. he thinks to himself that once he gets to 3,010 miles, he's calling it. So he checks the weather at his alternate because he's already got an alternate. It's 3,000 and scattered. So as he's lower and lower, he's already got his plan in place. So pretty soon he can't even make it at 6,500. He's got to lower himself to 5,500. So he gets on the phone with air traffic and he requests opposite direction cruise altitude. I mean, there's not much traffic out there anyway. It's pretty cloudy, so we can go down another 1,000 feet. So, and he can see the mountains disappearing into the clouds at this point, just if you want a good visualization. The visibility is still pretty good, and he deviates north of his terrains, and so he's just west of Palmdale, and he recognizes that he's at his personal minimum. So he states it. There he is. He's got a decision point. He's hit the clouds at 3,000 AGL. He wants to see if he's hit the worst of it. He's at 3,000 AGL. He knows he's not comfortable going any further. And pretty soon it's looking like everything is just going to go worse. So all he has to do here is say to himself, well, that's my minimum. I'm not going to do it. I'm changing my mind. He asks ATC and that he tells ATC that the weather's deteriorating. He wants to go to his alternate. And there's his alternate. So, and that's General Fox Field. All right. So he calls for, or so he continues on. He goes north of Lancaster and he lands at his alternate. So it's a pretty uneventful flight for Gallant. He lands, he gets himself an Uber, he goes and he grabs a rental car at Lancaster. Maybe he Ubers all the way down to Van Nuys, whatever it is. He calls his boss, he says, hey, remember me? You know how I said I was gonna be an hour? We gotta postpone for a little bit. I'll be a little bit late, I hope you don't mind. And his boss is like, yeah, you already told me about that, don't worry. Here we go. All right, so does that make sense so far? We've got Gallant, the good guy, and he's got his personal minimum, and you can see easily his decision point. So good. Now we're going to talk about Goofus here. So we've got Goofus, and he's over at the same altitude, and he's just as uncomfortable as Gallant is. He's thinking about all the same things that Gallant is. And he hits the exact same point over here, where he's at 3,000 feet AGL and 10 miles visibility, and he's watching all the mountains disappear into the clouds. But this guy's got no personal minimum. So he makes no decision. This is not a decision point for him at all. He's going to continue. And he's not thinking about an alternate at this point because he hasn't filed one. And he knows that there's some airports out in the general vicinity, but he's not really sure. So he's not thinking about his alternate. He's thinking about how he's going to be late for his meeting and how the situation really sucks. And it does. And that's kind of the same situation you find yourself in when you're like backed up on the highway or something like that. You don't have a contingency plan. You don't have an alternate. And you're just thinking, man, this looks like crap. So that's kind of what Goofus is thinking right now. He doesn't have an alternate plan. So he keeps going lower and he fails to make a decision. And he keeps going lower and he fails to make a decision. He can't see what this highway looks like down here. There's a pass in there that you need to pass through in order to get into Van Nuys, and the clouds are too low. He can't really see what he's doing. He can't pick up the ATIS now because he's too low behind the terrain. And he keeps going. And there's nothing that tells him he's really uncomfortable. Oop, I'm going backwards. All right, so finally, this guy is trying to decide what to do. Everything is looking horrible. And he realizes, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm in over my head. I can't do this anymore. I've gone too far. It's clear I'm finally not going to make my meeting. I've got to get out of here. So this is a panic decision. And since he's been so wrapped up in looking at the weather that's descending above him and the terrain that's rising below him, he's got to spend most of his mental energy staying in between those two things. And he's got to kind of thread the needles. So he's threading the needle between this, and he doesn't have time to look for an alternate. And now the visibility is dropping, and he's backed himself into a corner. He never left himself an out, and he should have made a decision beforehand, but he never recognized the place to make it. So now with the deteriorating weather, he doesn't have very many options anymore. He's too focused on the terrain and the clouds. And he's been thinking about whether he's supposed to divert for the last 10 minutes. He's been burning up all of his mental energy and trying to make decisions for the last 10 minutes. So whether he's been skirting the clouds this entire time or whether he's been in and out of them, it finally scares him enough that he's got to turn around. And now he can't see anything. He doesn't understand where his alternates are. The only thing that he knows is he's not going to make it to Van Nuys. So he turns around and he tries to find an alternate. He flips up his chart and he comes to our small alternate over here. That's Agua. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't read it now. I had it all written out, but Agua Dulce. So he lands in Agua Dulce, which is a little town, population 3,000 people, with a very short strip, no services, actually it's got services, but no tie downs, and not an Uber for miles. And the closest rental car place is about 50 miles away in Lancaster. So, and not only that, but he doesn't realize that. He doesn't have time to realize that. The only thing that he's got to do is turn around in the clouds and try to find this little airport. So he's VFR, he's not IFR. He can get himself a direct point, but he can't spot the runway. So he winds up weaving all over the place, and he finally makes it to his alternate, and he's stuck there. And he calls his boss and he says, I don't know what I'm going to be in. I can't get an Uber. I had to land at another airport. There's no rental car for 50 miles. I'll see you when I see you. And his boss says, why didn't you say anything? You've always been on time for work. I don't understand why this is a problem. And I love drawing this out because it's just this cluttered disaster of a screen here, as he's got all these decision points that he completely fails to make a decision at. And finally, it ends in a squiggly line. So, hang on a sec, that decided to back up. Here's everybody. Here's what it looks like if you have personal minimums in the green, and here's what it looks like if you don't have personal minimums in the red. And this is starting to make sense why we start to think about front loading our decisions, why we start to think about why this is important. And we start to think about that phrase. You know, did Gallant use his superior judgment to avoid a situation where he had to use the superior skill? Because remember, Goofus is just as talented and as experienced as Gallant is. It's just the only thing that he didn't have was a decision point that he created himself. Right? All right, good deal. So the idea behind personal minimums, the idea behind this is that you want to front load your decisions. And when I say front load your decisions, you want to decide as early as possible whether you're okay with doing something and whether you'd like to divert and what other options you have. Turning back, going to an alternate is a decision that you have to make, and failing to make the decision is considered poor decision making. We'll talk about that here in a little bit too. So if you decide well before, like Gallant did, when he's going to divert, you won't put yourself into a corner where you've got to make decisions while you're already fatigued. You also have something called decision points in the flight. This is something that we got from the military. They've been using these, what they call key decision points during a flight for goodness knows how long. They make a decision to go, no go before they even get in the airplane. And they're in a crew environment, so they make the decision with the crew. Of course, we're going to be single pilot out there, so we've got to adapt decision points for single pilot operations. So your decision point is just going to be a conscious decision that you make, but you've got a go, no go decision before you even get off the ground. You've got another decision point after your run up before you take off. And that's the next decision is, are we going to take off? You'll have a midpoint decision. A lot of people like to say you make a go, no go decision every hour in the air. And this would be a great example. The personal minimums will cause additional decision points throughout the flight, such as 3,000 AGL in this case. And then of course you've got the top of descent decision, the approach decision, whether you're going to commence the approach, and then you've got a landing decision. How do we feel about landing now that we've already gotten here? So that's what front loading decisions does. It's going to keep you from getting stressed out during the flight. It's things that you've already premeditated. So there's another thing that I didn't put in these slides too, and that's mental schemas. They've done tests on pilots and simulators and found out that the more successful pilots with the highest chance of surviving emergency situations, and not only surviving those emergency situations, but feeling like they have control of the situation throughout, are the ones that have already premeditated mental schemas of scenarios that they've run and limitations that they can hit. So, and this is what I mean by front loading. All these premeditated decisions of what we're going to do if this happens, what we're going to do if that happens, what we're going to do if it's 0-0, what we're going to do if we wake up and we don't feel well enough to fly. Those are all front loaded, things that you've already thought about. Canned decisions, if you will. So, all right. So the regulations here are just a starting point. We're going to talk about legal versus safe here in a bit. And here's a really great example. Would you go out after 5 years of no night flights, do 3 laps in the pattern, and then go carry someone like your family at night in the mountains solo? So that's what I mean by legal but not safe. And so not only are we going to say that, no, that sounds like a terrible idea, but we're also going to set criteria for what we're going to do to be comfortable carrying our family at night in the mountains solo. Maybe an IFR ticket, could be 5 hours of dual instruction, could be an IPC. Lots of different things there. The second thing that we're thinking about is decision fatigue. And I love this topic. This is one of my favorite topics. So decision fatigue is something that happens when you make too many decisions. And you will actually wear yourself out making decisions. And as you make those decisions, any subsequent decisions will be degraded and they'll kind of deteriorate. And I think the best example is the grocery store. And they actually plan on you becoming decision fatigued in a grocery store. That's why they stick all the candy next to the checkout lanes with the coffee and the energy drinks and all that other stuff that you know isn't good for you, but you're probably going to buy anyway. That's where they get you. That's also why the grocery store puts up all those aisles in the middle of all those sale items. They're really, really good, and you might have forgotten that you needed them. And you have to stop along the way at the grocery store and make a decision as you pass these little islands. Those things are designed to cause you to make a decision every time you pass one. So by the time you get through all the aisles at the grocery store, you got yourself a problem. And I shop for a family of 4, and before the advent of grocery pickup, which is the most magical thing ever because it presents all the decision fatigue for me, I used to get decision fatigued. I was terrible about bringing in a list, bringing in a plan, and I was terrible about front loading what I needed at the grocery store. So what would happen is one of 2 things, and these are the 2 outcomes of being decision fatigued. Either you're going to avoid decisions entirely, like Goofus, or you're going to make reckless decisions. And decision avoidance in the grocery store is going to be when you just give up in the middle of the grocery store, forget everything that you need. I'm tired and I'm late and I need to go. So, and I've walked home, or I've come home with like half the groceries that I need. I bought half the dinners and maybe like a thing of Pop-Tarts, and that's it. And I'm sorry, that's all I got. Reckless decisions, and you can see in the shopping cart here, that's when you're just going to throw everything that you've got in the cart. You're just going to reach to the back of the aisle and grab the entire row of chips and kind of slide it off into your cart and go home with it. And I've done this one too. And oh my gosh, my kids think it's the greatest thing in the entire world when I come home after reckless decisions. So, but you can see how this would apply to a flight, and both of these outcomes can happen. Decision avoidance is something that very much happens. You've already got a mission, you've already got a plan. Your plan was to not make a decision at any point during the flight. You have no decision points. So you're just going to avoid changing your plan when everything is falling to pieces around you. So, and that's the biggest one, is that everybody likes to continue with their plan. The reckless decisions could be something like diverting to an alternate when you read the weather wrong, or just making out there decisions to do wild things that you wouldn't have otherwise done before. Oh, for instance, buying the candy, things like that. You fly into icing. You make the decision to turn into icing because you see it and you think that there's no other option. I don't care. I've just got to get through it. It's probably a thin layer anyway. I'm going to turn into it. Stuff like that. So these are the 2 things that decision fatigue can give you. And there's an obvious reason why you need to prevent it. And that's what personal minimums are going to do for you. You can call it good decision making all you want, but you are going to wear out that muscle throughout a flight. And not only are you going to wear out a muscle during the flight, but you're going to wear it out right when you need it the most. Because everyone knows that the approach and landing is when you are the most fatigued and the most task saturated. I like how this, I don't like how this pilot capability curve right here, I'm not really sure why it keeps going up. Maybe you kind of get into the swing of things, But I like to think that this pilot capability requirement starts deteriorating right around the cruise area, right when you start getting kind of complacent. And all of a sudden you hit this heavy workload, heavy task requirement area of the approach and landing phase, where either you've got to make a decision now, or things weren't looking like they were, or you're just saturated because air traffic control's got you doing a lot of stuff and you have to shoot an approach. Even if you planned on it, that's task saturation. So we can relate this to Goofus and Gallant, because Gallant has already pre-canned all of his decisions. This decision fatigue is going to keep these pilot capabilities of his high whenever it comes to a critical phase of flight. Goofus has been thinking since cruise, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. So now his pilot capabilities during the approach and landing phase are somewhere down here. He's not looking nearly as good because he blew all of his brain power thinking about what he was going to decide to do. And he made his decision late while he was descending through the clouds. Gallant's already hit his decision point. He already knows exactly what he's going to do. He front loaded everything. He's still got the capabilities by the time he comes to the critical phase of flight where you have to divert. And now you've got to plug in new frequencies, and now you've got to work around different airspace than you planned on working on. And now you've got to, maybe you're dealing with the tower instead of an uncontrolled field, or an uncontrolled field instead of a tower. Maybe you've got to dial in a different approach. You got to reprogram a GPS. All of these things happen here. So you've got to store up all of that mental energy by making all your decisions as early as possible and keeping your mind clean and ready to go, which is what Gallant did. So that's why we need to prevent decision fatigue. That's why we need to front load all of our decisions. And that's why the hairiest part of the flight is where people are going to fall apart. So the superior pilot uses his superior judgment to avoid the situations which require the use of his superior skill again. So I'll hit that one home again. I'm going to hammer on this one because I really like it. Gallant did that. Gallant used the judgment. He used his personal minimums to avoid the situation which required the use of his skill. Goofus didn't have a decision point. He continued on beyond where he should have because he wasn't sure. And it took him 10 minutes to figure out whether he should have gone on or not. All right. So I've got a link here, and somebody hit that link for me and tell me if it takes you somewhere. I want to make sure that that works, because if not, I'm going to post it in the chat. Actually, let me see if I can post it in the chat anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't work. We can't click on your screens.
Oh no. All right, well, I can't copy paste this. Let me back out for a sec. Let me highlight it, and then I'm going to dump it into the chat for everybody. You guys see that? I'll give everybody
there, Kathy. Thank you.
Say what? You got it?
Yep, it's there.
All right, good stuff. So go visit that link. And this is going to be a personal minimum card that the FAA safety team puts out. And this is kind of a very basic, good launching point for basic personal minimums. These are the ones that you've heard of. I'm not going to fly in X knots of crosswind. I'm not going to fly with X ceilings. And I'm not going to do this in mountainous terrain. And my comfort level exists here. So, and then we're going to get into more specific, kind of almost advanced personal minimums here in a little bit too, just kind of something beyond this. So I hope everybody's got a chance to pull that up and you have a chance to kind of look at it. You can put me in the slides up in a corner if you really need to. Up at the top, it says, think of personal minimums as the human factor's equivalent of a reserve fuel. So there's a reason we have a regulation for reserve fuel, right? So you don't want to plan your fuel down to zero for obvious reasons. So you as a pilot, you're not a test pilot. So if your airplane says it can do 23 knots of crosswind, maybe you don't want to do that. So now that's max demonstrated. I know that's not, you know, set in stone. Yea, and verily you will not go over 23 knots of crosswind. It's demonstrated crosswind, but still, once you pass that 23 knots of crosswind, you are entering test pilot territory, as they say, because nobody's done it before and they didn't do that when they were certifying the aircraft. So you set your own. So this card starts out, and I encourage you to print it and just kind of go through it just to get the feel of personal minimums and contemplating how they work. It starts out with your certificate level and flight review times and recent experience over the last 12 months. And this is just to take a basic assessment of what you've been doing. Sometimes if your flying has been kind of erratic, maybe because of 2020, maybe because you had a job change like I did, and you're not doing the kind of flying that you thought you were, some of this stuff can actually surprise you a little bit. So I hadn't kept tabs on my logbook and I don't know how long, and I come to find out I've flown 2 hours at night in the last 2 years. Actually, almost 3 years. I think I'd flown 10 hours a night in the last 3 years, flying Maverick Airlines, Grand Canyon tours, day VFR most of the time. And I had no nighttime. So you do an assessment of this and it can kind of surprise you. Most people will do these that say, I wind up doing them at flight safety. Sometimes you wind up doing them when you sit down with the CFI for a flight review. Sometimes you sit down and do it when you're getting ready for a new rating. But if you don't, this is a really great way of doing it. And next up, you're going to ascertain your comfort level. And all you have to do here is just kind of talk about what you're comfortable with. Now, a lot of people think that setting a personal minimum will cause you to be more conservative than you would have been otherwise. And I hear this is a huge problem for people. They don't want to have a personal minimum that's going to keep them from taking a flight that they would otherwise make, which is a valid concern. I wouldn't want my personal minimums limiting me. And I really wouldn't want my personal minimums keeping me from growing as a pilot. I'd really like to get out there and push myself to be more comfortable and better, or in crazier scenarios. I'd like to be better at crosswind landing. So I want to work my way up to 23 knots. I want to be proficient with my IFR ticket. I don't want to do, I don't feel comfortable flying with, only 6 approaches in 6 months, that kind of thing. So you can set your personal minimums. I'm going to do 12 approaches in 6 months, and I'm going to do half of them, in actual IMC. I'm going to go find it. I know that's hard to do in Vegas, but, it is what it is. Maybe you find yourself a simulator in the area and, go do that for 6 of your approaches, and then you do the rest in the airplane. So you can set these minimums. So, and I encourage you to go through these, and it talks about make and model as well. So if you jump into a different make and model, you set yourself a new minimum. So there's a lot to do with weather, ceiling, visibility. There's obvious changes for day, night, marginal VFR, IFR, low IFR, all of this stuff, turbulence. And then there's this bottom card here. You can see that it's got PAVE. We're going to look at PAVE here in a second. And under pilot, it's got illness, medication, stress, an unfamiliar airplane, and all of these little criteria where you add like 500 foot to your ceiling, or you add half a mile to your visibility. And while these are a great starting point, and it's kind of great to categorize and quantify some of the limitations that you should be looking at, I think this gets a little specific. And I like to keep it way more simple than this. So personally, I don't really use this one. Personally, I've got some different minimums set, and we'll talk about those here in a little bit. So after you guys get through with that card, go ahead, print that thing out, and just kind of baseline yourself for all of those questions. We'll talk about some of the other things that you could be setting as personal minimums that are a little grayer and sometimes more real world, depending on what kind of flying you're doing. So, well, not to say that the basic ones aren't real world, but you know what I mean. So we're going to go through everything in PAVE. We're going to talk about a lot of different factors. And if you find any really good questions where you should be thinking harder about a scenario or a factor or a risk, then do me a favor, write it down, keep notes, print out that personal minimums chart and start writing on the back of it for any additional things that you'd like to be considering. And we're going to talk about the following questions for every risk value that we can find. So what factors make me uncomfortable? Every pilot out there already has a level of where they feel comfortable and where they don't feel comfortable. And we're just going to make that a hard, fast rule. And you can move it around as you see fit. We're going to talk about legality versus safety, which is one of my favorite things. And then you can actually, this is a really great way of doing things. You can take a big hint from Part 135 and 121 airline minimums, which are usually higher than 91. So I'll give you for instance, like a Part 135 airplane is only allowed to launch towards an airport if it lands on 60% of the runway to a full stop. So if you're going to take 80% of the runway at your point of intended landing, you're not even allowed to take off. So, and that's something that a 135 plane has to think about that a 91 plane doesn't. So if you go land on some postage stamp somewhere with a 3,000 foot strip when you're heavy and the DA is really hot, and let's say that it's a higher elevation, like a 5,000 foot runway, and your ground speed is going to be faster. Okay, well, that's something where we really should be considering a 60% landing factor. So let's calculate it out. Can I land on 60% of that hot, high runway that's also very short? And set that as our minimum, maybe for anything that's over 5,000 feet AGL, or something else like that. Maybe even for every place that you go to, if you really feel like it. So, but that's something for you to set. So there's a lot of rules regarding filing alternates, but you can just file an alternate or consider an alternate if you're not filing every single time that you fly. And not only is it a great personal minimum, it's a fantastic practice. And the one time out of 100 that it saved you, you're going to be very thankful that you had already looked at an airport, where it is, how to get to it, and what kind of frequencies you're dealing with. You don't have to go overboard with it and kind of sit there scratching your head for half an hour. But if you have one in your mind, you're going to wind up on the gallant side of things, where all you have to do is tune the frequency and go to where you were planning on going. You're already thinking about your alternate before you even get to one of these decision points. And that's the point. So we're going to run all these questions through PAVE here in a little bit. And last but not least, we're going to talk about, is there any guidance? And that could be guidance from the FAA, guidance from a CFI that you've had, any articles, AOPA articles, wonderful, bold method articles are wonderful. I like to look up NASA reports. Those are my favorite. I kind of enjoy those. We'll make sure that I'm doing well on time. So the first one that we'll talk about is pilot. And these are kind of interesting because it's very difficult to quantify setting personal minimums for anything on the I'm safe checklist. Well, if I cough 7 times, I'm too sick to fly, doesn't really work. So, but let me give you a really great example of a personal minimum on the I'm safe checklist that's happening now. And this comes from the airlines, actually. So here's a great idea. What are the airlines doing, and should I do it too? The airlines have a recommendation that you wait 48 hours after getting your COVID vaccine to go flying. That's a personal minimum, isn't it? It's a personal minimum that they as an airline has set, but it's something that you can definitely set too. Don't go flying within 48 hours of getting your COVID vaccine. That's a personal minimum. A lot of people wind up with low-grade fever and flu symptoms, things like that. Sometimes they don't even start until 24 hours after the fact. So do yourself a favor, set a personal minimum to wait 48 hours after you got your COVID vaccine. Here's another one. So no flying in under 2 days on any new medication, regardless of whether it's that vaccine or not. Set yourself a minimum for flying after you've given blood. I have, a really great example for personal minimums too. And like I said, these are a little harder to set, and they're also very muddied by external pressures I've found. And I'll give you a really good example of an I'm safe minimum that somebody busted because of external pressures. I knew a guy who was flying for a large airline and woke up with a crazy sinus infection one day. And he tried to call in sick, and his chief pilot told him, "No, I need you. I don't have any reserve pilots. You're going flying today." And because he didn't have any hard, fast minimums on how sick he needed to be in order to say, "No, I'm not doing it," he bought into it and came to work under the external pressure of his chief pilot. So he goes flying, and he wound up blowing his eardrum out. And it took out his, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, it gave him vertigo after the fact. Once he blew out that eardrum, it gave him vertigo for 2 years, and he lost his medical. He had vertigo so badly that there were times when he couldn't walk. At one point, he almost died. He fell into a swimming pool because he lost his balance and was going to drown because he couldn't figure out which way was up. And the only reason he survived that encounter was because the family dog jumped in after him. So he credits that dog with saving his life that day. But and he eventually went on to get his medical back, but they had to do surgery, peel back half of his face and his ear, fix his inner ear, put it all back together. And then eventually he had to jump through all the hoops to get his medical back and return to flying. And there was a bonus fact that they kind of glued his ear back on a little bit wrong. So now glasses lay sideways on his face and his wife thinks it's hilarious. So, but that's a really great example of a personal minimum that he should have set. I am X sick. I don't want to get out of bed. I know my body and I shouldn't be flying. And I'm going to stick to this minimum that I have set for myself. So, but like I said, it's all muddied by external pressures by that point. So let's talk about currency a little bit too. We touched on it earlier. Are 6 approaches going to be enough for you if you haven't flown in 6 months? Period. Dot. So why don't you set yourself a personal minimum? I'm going to go up with a CFI and do at least 3 of them. I'm going to hit a simulator and I'm going to do 3 different types. Set something above and beyond your even your grace period. If you're in your grace period, you're 12 months into not shooting any approaches, and on the very last day of the 12th month before you need an IPC, you go shoot 6 approaches. Are you going to be carrying your family through potential icing situations and solid IMC up to Reno? You know, it doesn't sound like a comfortable place. So set your personal minimums that you're going to shoot 12 approaches and get some additional weather training before you fly any passengers around. You know, same way with night takeoffs and landings. Are you going to go do 3 bounces around the pattern after not having flown for 5 years and fly your family at night in the mountains? We talked about that one too. Night, instrument, all of those things. A flight review. Oh, here's a good one. If you get a flight review, do you have to get it in an airplane? If you're dual rated in a helicopter? The answer is no. You can get a flight review in any aircraft that you're rated for, right? So if you get your flight review in a helicopter and it reinstates an old rating in a glider, are you going to go out and fly a glider tomorrow? Probably not. Set yourself a personal minimum to go up with an instructor for a minimum of 3 hours. Tell yourself to do it and then go actually do it before you jump in a glider. So that kind of leads into the aircraft side of things on whether you're familiar with the current aircraft. Have you been flying nothing but helicopters for the last 5 years? My personal minimum here is, like I said, I want 5 hours of instruction with the CFI before I go bombing around in a single engine piston plane, or I want a safety pilot. So at the very least. So and aircraft equipment, are you going to jump into a G1000 after having flown a 6-pack? Maybe you haven't flown a G1000 in 10 years. That happened to me. Actually, I took about 5 years off of flying. I came back, I flew a 6-pack around. I got my double I in a Garmin G1000 172 10 years ago, and then I jumped in a DA40 expecting to know anything, and it didn't work out the way that I thought. So, and I jumped right in IFR training with it too. It took me about 3 hours to become really comfortable with it, and I still went for my double I reinstatement ride, which I had to do, and cleared out the entire flight plan right before I entered a hold on an approach because I just wasn't familiar. So that's the kind of stuff that you have to think about. So I should have set a personal minimum for that of an additional 2 hours of flight time. I should have thought about it. I should have thought about it outside of the cockpit. I should have thought about it before I scheduled anything with the DPE. So I passed the check ride anyway because I got it all plugged back in, but it was one of those tense, goofus moments. So comfortable with the load and the runway, fuel minimums. These are all really great. Are you comfortable with 45 minutes of fuel at night in the mountains when your alternate's, 100 miles away? No. Are you going to think about that before you launch? Are you going to think about that after you launch? Are you going to think about it while you're pre-flighting? If you set that personal minimum, you front load your fuel minimums, night, VFR, mountains, with an alternate that's very far away, well before you even hit the airport, and you already know what you're ready to do. So the big one's weather. I think we talked about just about most of the weather ones, and a lot of these are covered with the basic chart that the FAA safety website gave you, the link that I gave you, the little chart. So most of these are covered. How much crosswind can you handle? That kind of thing. My favorite phrase here, and I don't know, actually do me a favor and tell me if you've heard this one in the chat. Have you ever heard the phrase, if Southwest isn't going, I ain't going? Has anybody ever heard that one? Anybody with an IFR ticket? If Southwest ain't going, I ain't going. So that is to say that Part 91 has no takeoff minimums, right? Those of you IFR rated pilots know that IFR, you could take off in zero visibility. So you could take off in a bank of fog and it's legal. So are we going to do that? So because look at the airliners are grounded. Do you really think you're going to do better than the airliners in your 172? The only reason they have that requirement is because they have 150 people on board that they're concerned about. That's the commercial guys. So if you'd like to hold yourself to commercial standards, if you'd like to hold yourself to a little bit higher safety standards and not accept that kind of risk, this is what a personal minimum is. Southwest probably can't take off with less than 500 feet visibility. Standard, you could even choose standard takeoff minimums as your personal minimum. Those are 5,000 feet. Right? 5,000 feet visibility or 1 mile visibility is a great personal minimum for an IFR pilot. It means you can see, most of the way down whatever runway you're taking off of probably. And you'll be able to get off the ground with a little bit of visibility down towards the runway left as you, do whatever it is that you're going to do, make your turns, do your obstacle departure procedure. So that's my favorite phrase. If Southwest ain't going, I ain't going. That's a personal minimum. And it's something that a lot of people have heard before and never really thought about it in the context of personal minimums, I think. So, and that's another reason to think about what the airlines are doing as well. Because obviously it's going to make you uncomfortable to take off 0-0. It's not something that we all get an opportunity to do very often. So unless you're flying every single day IFR with low ceilings, it's not something that you're going to be proficient at. And you should set a personal minimum for that. I'll talk about this last one here. I like this one because it's gray. We've got external pressure. I'm not sure what kind of flying you guys do. There's not really a whole lot of external pressure if you guys are just working on a rating. The only kind of external pressure that you have is if there's an upcoming check ride and you're trying to squeeze in a last practice flight. And even so, those are easy to cancel. Check rides are relatively easy to reschedule, even though it's a big pain in the butt. But I'll give you a really great example of external pressure that I faced one time. And if you've heard any of my presentations before, you know that I use this scenario over and over again because it was that harrowing of a flight that I will never do again. And so I go to Sedona one day. I'm taking my best friend and her new fiance to their wedding in Sedona from Las Vegas. And they have this whole plan. They're going to come in from Oklahoma. They're going to fly into Las Vegas. I'm going to pick them up with his daughter. So I've got 3 passengers. They have minimal baggage and we're going to go fly into Sedona so they can hike into the middle of the woods and get married with about 10 people in the audience. So if you want to talk about external pressure, I've got a bunch of relatives hanging out in the middle of Sedona, nowhere, and I've got to take the bride and the groom there. So that's difficult. So there's a ton of external pressure there right out of the gate. And how on earth are you going to set a personal minimum for something like that? You can't set 3,000 feet AGL for something like I'm carrying a bride and a groom. You can't set anything for that involves numbers or anything concrete. So what are you supposed to do with the external pressure of carrying a bride and a groom? So, and my personal minimum, and this actually arose from that flight, is to mitigate as much as I possibly can every single time that I go fly with external pressure. And always have a backup plan. I never go flying without a backup plan now because of that flight. I spent way too much time thinking about that flight. I called up my best friend and I said, look, I am flying you in a very small airplane and things like clouds or too much wind are going to stop us from getting to your wedding. I hope you have a backup plan. What's your backup plan if I can't get you to Sedona? And she goes, oh, that's no big deal. We'll just get married by Elvis in Las Vegas. Oh, well, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. So now my backup plan is to have my best friend get married by Elvis in Las Vegas. I've got something that is relieving the pressure, which is just wonderful because everything else in the flight came to a head because she started adding passengers and baggage and I had to switch airplanes to a Cherokee 6, which I wasn't as familiar with. And I decided that Sedona was a terrible idea because it was off the end of a 500-foot mesa with a downsloped runway. So there were a lot of other mitigating factors. I switched her over to Cottonwood. We landed at Cottonwood, drove to Sedona. There were a lot of other things that were going on there. And then I had to get them home at night at the end of the wedding. So now I've got get home-itis. My nearest alternate is insanely far away. I had to put a ton of fuel on. And there, the desire to have mission completion to get back to Las Vegas so that they can go on their honeymoon was absolutely huge. So the external pressures there had to be mitigated. If we get stuck in Sedona, you know, we are going to do this and you are going to stay in a hotel. Your family will be driving to Las Vegas if I can't get you there. All of these backup plans, all of these mitigations. Gallant's over there telling his boss that he might not make it in and he might be about an hour late. Those kind of things are the personal minimums that you set. And it's just very simple. Don't take off without a backup plan. Don't take off without giving people the news of what to expect. Flying corporate now, we get a lot of trips for Aspen. And the first thing that we tell people is we might not get into Aspen. And they tell the broker tells them that, and anybody that they contact in our company tells them that. And when they show up at the airplane, we tell them that, because Aspen's all over the place. You get a tailwind, there's only one way in, one way out. You can't get into Aspen, you're going to Eagle. We've had people that are like, oh yeah, I've been flying private for I don't know how long, and I actually have a rental car also booked at Eagle. So if we need to go to Eagle, that's totally fine. And they'll already have alternates planned. Oh, well, no, I don't like Eagle. I prefer Rifle as an alternate. Can you file that? And we get that kind of thing all the time. These people expect not to go where their destination is because they know that it's touchy. So if you just prep them for that, they can do their planning and they can front load their decisions as well. So I've had people with rental cars in 3 different towns. So, and then they just cancel the reservations at the last minute. It's kind of awesome. So keep it simple on the external pressure. Just make yourself have a backup plan. It kind of prevents all of these things. Changing your personal minimums is something you absolutely should do. Again, you don't want your personal minimums to limit you from taking flights that you would otherwise make. If you have any significant changes in your recency, then you need to reevaluate. I'm getting rustier and rustier for single pilot flying in a small piston engine. So as I get rustier and rustier, I'll start upping my minimums. Instead of a safety pilot, I want a CFI. Instead of 2 hours, I would like 5. Barring any significant changes, every 6 months is good. So you can also ask a CFI and a pilot or a trusted friend. They found psychologically that if you talk to other people about your personal minimums, you're more likely to follow them. There's a lot of recommendations in the pamphlet that I gave you that say things like, you can talk to your spouse or talk to a loved one, which I actually kind of discourage because frankly, my husband doesn't like it when I get all fire and brimstone on him. So, if I'm going to, get an under 3,000 AGL and I haven't flown the airplane in a year, am I going to lawn dart it into the side of a mountain? No, I probably am. So he doesn't really like that. So I usually don't recommend going to your trusted loved ones for this. I do recommend a CFI or trusted pilot. They spitball with you. They help you develop these mental schemas that you have. They send you NASA reports and NTSB reports that they've looked at. They're really great resources. You sit down, you talk about things that you're not comfortable with, and you talk about, and they have examples that they can run with too. So, and the biggest thing when you're reevaluating, and for any personal minimums, is to evaluate when you're not under pressure to perform. It's not a personal minimum if you develop it under fire. So you've got to think about these things when you're sitting at a desk, and then you've got to, of course, stick with them. You got to do that Scouts Honor thing where if you sell yourself, you're not going to be in a ceiling of under 3,000 AGL. You're not going in with a ceiling of under 3,000 AGL. And that's all there is to that. It has to be a decision point, otherwise the whole thing falls apart. All right. Final scenario, because I know it's getting late. If you guys want to get in the chat. So we've got Joe, the pilot here, and we're going to set his personal minimums real quick. So we'll talk about Joe. He's got a Cessna 182 with an engine that's nearing TBO. And he likes to take his family flying, and they go visit relatives. They're in the desert in Las Vegas. They also like to go camping. So they load this 182 up with a bunch of camping equipment and 4 people. So it's pretty full. He's got a private rating. He's got an instrument rating. And he's an average pilot. He can hold his airspeed on takeoff. He can hold VY at these high density altitude airports. Sometimes he looks down and he's about 5 to 10 knots off. He's using the regular old Cessna spaghetti charts, those little tiny charts that you can never get the right answer with on tests, on your writtens. So he's using those. So he's got kind of a fudge factor of about 100, 200 feet, just in case he does those calculations wrong. So if Joe were to go out there and set personal minimums for this type of flying, what kind of personal minimums do you think he would set with these concerns of high weight, potentially high density altitude, unimproved fields where you can go camping, family, all these kinds of things. Anything that you guys can think of. You know, the biggest thing that he's concerned about is his tired engine. He's not going to develop the climb performance that he wants. He's going to have hot days. He's worried about max gross weight. I'll give you guys a minute to think about it. All right, engine looked over. There you go. Not fly until the engine is looked over. Driving. When? When should he drive? Runway length. Give me something specific. 60% landing factor, 80% landing factor. Should he be able to land on 60% of the runway? 80% of the runway? 50% of the runway? Crosswind's a really good one. He's heavy. He's an average pilot. How about, should he stay under max gross takeoff weight? Temp limit for takeoff, boom. That's one that I wanted to hit on. A temp limit for takeoff. I really like that one because once your DA gets too hot, your numbers get too poor. You know, if there's any fudge factor, there's humidity, the temperature is hotter than forecast. That could be something. Over a certain temperature, he decides to drive. 40 degrees Celsius, he decides to drive. How about that? There's a specific personal minimum. Oops, it's hit 40 degrees, kids, get in the car. There's your personal minimum. Anyone want to say that he's going to overload that airplane? I would say 200 pounds under max gross takeoff weight. That would be mine. Family decision to camp during the summer months with a rented RV. Visit relatives in the car. You only use the airplane in spring and fall. What else you guys got? Anything? I like runway length. Runway length I hadn't quite thought of. So if he's landing at these small unimproved fields and he's got a long landing roll, he's liable to run off the end of the runway. All right, good stuff. So I know I'm getting kind of to the end here, so we'll talk about this real quick. Don't fill it full of fuel. Oh, there you go. That's a good one. And that one's got pros and cons too. If it's clearing 1 million and you've got enough fuel to meet your personal minimums of maybe 45 minutes to an hour, something that's longer than 30, you know. Oh, good. How much experience does he have flying at max gross weight? That's true. If he does it every single day of his life, he likes to go hunting and he likes to load up a bunch of deer meat in the back of the airplane. And that's what he does when he's not flying anywhere else. And great. If he's just tooling around town most of the time and he never flies at max gross weight, he just fills up the tanks and flies by himself, he doesn't have nearly as much experience. So, and that's a reason he would be changing his personal minimums as he gains that experience too. You know, 6 months into flying his family around on a regular basis, he might decide that he's more comfortable at max gross takeoff weight and he trusts the airplane, even though it's got an engine that's close to TBO and not developing full power. No night flying. I just hate night flying in the mountains. It's not really my jam anyway. So, especially I would just file IFR at night. That's my personal minimum. I fly IFR at night around here. I'm on an IFR flight plan. I'm always navigating that way. So, all right. Anyway, I wanted to talk about, oh, my slide came out wrong. I'm so sorry. Hang on a second. So what do you do when you're presented with a situation where you haven't created any personal minimums? I apologize for the slide title. So sometimes this is going to happen. You haven't developed a personal minimum and you just wind up in a goofy situation and you got to recognize your discomfort and you've got to plan for it. You got to front load any decisions. I know a pilot who will lose sleep at night trying to plan any and all decisions ahead of time. Not to the point that he's just kind of fatiguing himself, but he'll make plans. He'll plan alternates. He'll plan 2 alternates. You can do a FRAT. And if you don't know what those are, I could tell you all about those too. A flight risk assessment tool. Talk to a CFI. And frankly, I know that this isn't a popular thing to say, but trust your gut. If it doesn't look right, it probably isn't, and you should trust yourself on that. So if you don't like it, just turn back now. Don't be making that decision too late. If you don't know what a FRAT is, we can talk about it later. It's basically an assessment of all of the different risk factors that affect you during a flight. Sometimes I've been surprised by a couple of these. They give you kind of a green light, a yellow light, or a red light as to how risky your flight is. And if you wind up in the yellow, they suggest that you start mitigating things. It's just another way to kind of quantify risks and think about them and look at the cumulative risk of a flight and start playing with some of these factors to see if you can get greenlit by the FRAT again. So they're a pretty great tool. If you need anything else on FRATs, you can talk to me about that, or talk to me about that later. So anyway, you need to be creating decision points with your personal minimums, decisions to turn around, decisions to continue, decisions not to take off. Front load your decision making, prevent the decision fatigue that's going to be worst for you at the end of a flight when you need it the most. And consider your comfort level, your legality versus safety. Consider airline minimums as maybe a baseline for your personal minimums, and any guidance that's available to you for anything that's in the pilot aircraft environment external pressure model. Consult CFIs, and of course, stick to those personal minimums. Last but not least, it's my favorite. This is why we create the personal minimums, because we're using superior judgment to avoid the situations where we can't get backed out of something unless we use our superior skill. All right, I hope I'm on time.
No, that's perfect. I said 8:15, so you ended right at 8:15. That's pretty amazing. Do we have any questions? I'll go ahead and unmute, allow anybody to unmute themselves. So that should be enabled. So if anybody has any questions, you can either throw it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask away. I think you must have covered it pretty well, or you know, it's good material, obviously, always to review that. I actually, it's kind of ironic. I had an experience just this week. Today, I was going to fly up tomorrow to Salt Lake City, take my daughter up to go visit a college up there, and there's forecast for rain and snow in the morning. It's supposed to clear out, but you know, want to get up there in time, and so I decided to cancel my flight and book Southwest. And so
yeah,
you know, just even though I'm IFR rated and
could
go in the clouds, you know, the chance of running into icing and snow is too great, especially taking my daughter. So always have those things in mind. Any other questions or comments? Maybe experiences that anybody would like to share?
I got a question for you guys, actually. How many people actually had personal minimum set? How many of you had never heard about these before? You can answer in the chat or over audio. What kind of experiences? What did you guys come into this experience-wise with? Bueller? You guys had no idea what personal minimums were before you came into this, and I've just confused you more.
I like your front-loading comment about front-loading decisions. It's I think that's you put that in a way that I haven't heard before.
Thank you. Good stuff. I learned that from a captain.
Yeah. I usually look at it as a different way. You know, I kind of think of it as a risk ladder. You know, it's like, oh, there's a risk here. You know, 2 rungs, I'm done. I'm not doing the flight. You know, and any little thing can put me up at 1 step. So that's usually the way I look at it.
You should look up a flight risk assessment tool, a FRAT.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a ladder. They give you all these little risks, and you can see exactly what you're talking about, how everything is cumulative. You get to 2 large risks and then you call it a day. You get to 3 large risks. Oh my goodness, we're not even there. So that's the donut.
It looks like a few people have minimums that they've set for themselves, like ceiling and visibility. You know, coming to the safety meeting, I think, you know, we have quite a few people here that attended often. You know, I think that's a kind of a recurrent training maybe we're setting for ourselves, just to stay current on things. So it's always a great thing to always be learning.
Yeah.
I like the way that I've always considered personal minimums as something that you consider as a go, no go decision, not something that is an ongoing process during the flight
Decision points.
where, oh, wait a minute, these circumstances have exceeded my limitations while you're flying the airplane. That's not the way that I've taken this topic before. So that's really valuable.
Good stuff. Yeah, there's about 6 go, no go decisions throughout a flight, in any given flight, maybe more depending on how long it is.
Well, perfect. Well, we're gonna wrap it up, and then Kathy and I will stick around for a little bit longer to answer any questions that you guys might have in regards to flying or the club. Usually try to wrap it up by about 8:30 for tonight. But again, thank you, Kathy, so much for being here and giving a great presentation. Always a reminder, it's flying that we do in general aviation can be dangerous if we don't set some of these things and don't pay attention to the safety of it. So just being here enough is, means that you're learning and staying current on, what we should do to keep safe. So, and again, if any of you have any specific questions in regards to the flying club, I'll be around too. There's a couple of other members from our safety committee here that can answer some questions, but thank you for joining us tonight, and watch out for some announcements about new airplanes in the club and about getting back doing these live or a hybrid meeting here very soon. So we're excited about the ability to do that. So again, thank you, and everybody have a great night.
Good night. Thanks.